C# has quite a few classes and methods for handling file input and output. We're going to take a look at a couple of them. We're going to look at the file class, which includes several methods to create and read from text files. In fact, we'll learn how to create a text file, how to add data to the end of a text file, how to copy a text file, how to delete a text file. Okay, so pretty much anything you want to know about a text file, we will be covering. And then we are also going to take a look at the stream reader and stream writer class, which is based on text reader and text writer. Text reader and text writer are an abstract base class. And we've just learned about abstract classes, so you guys know what those are. And so the stream reader is derived from the abstract text reader, and stream writer is derived from the abstract text writer. And you'll notice the difference between using the file class and using the stream reader and stream writer immediately, because the file class only includes static methods. So we have to use the class name before the method name. But when we use the stream reader and stream writer, we actually have to create an object, and then we have to use that object to call the methods that will read from the file and write to the file. So it's a little different way of processing. So first, we're going to look at the file class. And as I mentioned, the file class has a lot of static methods. And so I've kind of listed the different methods here and what they do. And this is a pretty good list, but there are additional methods that we are not going to look at. So I did link out to all of the methods if you're curious and want to take a look. And then I created basically a single program that does everything that we want. So this single program displays a menu. In fact, maybe I will run it for you. So all of these programs in all of these lecture demos can be copied. And I'm just going to create a new project for this thing. And while that is starting up, we'll just take a little look here. We are going to get a menu, and we are going to have options to create a file, read from the file, append to the file, read the entire file into an array, or read the lines of a file. And then this case 6 is deleting the file. So I'm going to pull this over here. And you could create this and allow people to enter the text they want in the file. For simplicity sake, for this, I simply kind of coded in the text, but you certainly could have done a prompt and read the data from the console. So create file. The first two commands here, the first one is a path, and you'll notice that almost all of these static methods have a path to begin with, and that is either just the name of the file, or if you do not want the file stored in the default location, you can actually tell it the, physical path that it should take on your own hard drive. Okay, and so I'm going to store this in the default location, and I will show you where that is because it's not in the main part where the program CS file is. You have to dig a little deeper to find the file. Okay. And so here I've got some code. You'll notice I've got a \r and some of that. That is actually for a Mac. The N is for Unix. So you would not need both. But anyway, here is the code with the breaks in it, line breaks. And then when we get to the part where we are going to actually create the file, I have a try and a catch because that's the part that actually could have an error. So file.writeAllText, that is going to take this path and take the content and write it. It'll create the file. Okay, that's what write all text does. Okay? And then it displays a little message. If there is a problem writing the file, then it'll display this error. Now, the only problem I could think that you will have is if you try to specify a path and that path doesn't exist, or there's some kind of miskeying of the path. The append is actually a nice way to add to a file or to create a file. You'll notice I have the path variable and I also have my content, which I call new text. And with an append, it will create the file if it doesn't exist. And if the file does exist, it just adds to the bottom of it. So in the try catch is where I have my command, file.append all text. And you'll notice that I'm passing it the path and I'm also passing it that new text content. And if I run this and I don't go through the create, okay, what this will do is it will actually create the file for me. Okay, and so if I do the create first and then I do the append, it just adds the text in. Very unlikely to get an error unless there is a problem with the path. What the read does is it's going to read in everything and then it will simply write everything out. That's what I've designed it to do. So in this one at the top, I again have the path, but I'm not really going to specify content because I'm not writing to the file. Immediately, I've got my try and my catch, and I'm checking to see if the file exists. Okay, and so file.exists, and then you put the path in the parentheses. We'll check to see if it's there. So this is handling a very typical error. If the file does not exist, it's going to say file does not exist. If it is there, we read in everything, all of the text stored in the content variable, and then here we are writing that out. Okay, so it's highly unlikely that we are going to get an error here. If I did not include file exists, then there's a much higher incidence of error. Read to array. So this is a little different way of reading in the file. The previous command read in the whole thing. Read to array basically takes each line and makes that a separate element in the array, which means that you can go in and access things line by line, or you can access the last line or the first line. Okay. Or as I'm doing, you can loop through and just write it out line by line. Okay, so um, read all lines. You just give it the path. You have to store it in an array. Okay, and then if I just wanted the first line printed, I could actually index into lines with a 0 and print that. Okay, here I'm using for each, and I'm printing out every line. So again, highly unlikely to get an error because I am checking to make sure the file exists, and that is the most typical error, that the file doesn't exist, so we can't read from it. But I did include an IO exception just in case there was a different problem. The read lines is yet another way of reading from the file. So instead of reading all of the lines at once into an array and then processing the array, what this does is it lets you read one line at a time. So again, we have our path, we make sure it exists, and then we've got a for each. And so our little alias for what we are reading in is line. And then you can see here where we would normally put the array, we have file.readLines, and then we have the path. So this is going to function like an array. So we can read from it one line at a time, and we can print it out. Okay, so that is reading from and writing to the file. In addition, we do have a copy file static method that lets you make a backup copy. So this is actually a pretty slick process. I've used languages where you actually have had to read in one record at a time. You read in a record, you write it to the backup. You read in a record, you write it to a backup. This is pretty slick if we use the copy method. So here we have two variables that we create. One is the source path. So that is what we want to copy. And then we have a destination path, which is our backup file that we are creating. And then in our try block, we have file.copy, and we have to give it our source path and the destination. And then we are using true. And I believe that is for asynchronous processing. Okay. And then it will copy everything, just that one statement, and then it will indicate it ended successfully. If there was a problem copying, then it's going to go down into our catch. And again, the only problem I could see would be if you're specifying a path that includes, like your C drive and folders. If you're specifying that for the source or the destination, and you miskey something, that would obviously cause an error. Oh, also, if your source file doesn't exist, because I'm not checking to see if it exists. So that would also cause an error, but our catch would handle it. So when I run this, I'm actually going to show you that. And then the other command, which is to delete, that I did not put in a separate method. So that's just got, under case 6, we've got a little try block where we specify the path, we make sure the file is there, and then we use the delete command. So we're going to go ahead and run this. And let's do a 2. So the file should not exist. All right, it says file does not exist. So let me try to copy it. Well, let's see, backup file. And remember, I'm not checking to see if the file exists, so it should trigger an exception, which we are handling. Okay, so that is what I see if there is an exception. Okay, so not as user-friendly a message as the file does not exist. Okay, but my program keeps running. So I'm going to go ahead and let's do a write to the file. Okay, and then we'll read from it. Okay, and then let's do an append. All right, so let's do another read. Okay, and you can see that now my song has gotten a little bit longer. And I think the other reads are going to look very similar, even though the process is a little different. So let's do a for read to array. Okay, so not really seeing any difference there. And then let's do a 5. Okay, so again, doesn't really look that much different. Okay, and if I do the 7 now, okay, it is going to be able to copy it. So I'm going to wait a second before I delete it because I do want to show you where that file goes. I believe I've got this information down here. And the error message also showed where it was looking. So this is your project name. So wherever your project is stored, that is where you have to look. And then you have to look in bin, debug, net 8, and then you should see the file. So we're going to take a look. And I think I called this one Council App. Very creative name. All right, so let's go to C, users. Here's my username. And then let's look for source, repo. And I'm going to sort by date. Here's 195. Let me try that again because it should be, I think, near the top, unless I did not put it in 195. Let me see where I stuck that thing. We have to go back up to the top. I did put it in my 195 folder. Okay, console app 1. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, so we've got to look in bin debug .NET 8, and there it is. There's my regular, and there is my backup. Now, these are text files, so you can just right-click on them, and you can open them. Okay, and that's what was written. So I am going to now delete that. I'm going to go all the way down here. And you saw it went away. All right, so that is how we use the file class. For Stream Reader and Stream Writer, there are actually quite a few methods. And I've listed some of the methods for each one. We're going to take a look at Stream Writer first, and then we're going to look at Stream Reader. So we've got Stream Writer. There is a close method that closes the file stream. Flush, and I just love the name of that method. I think it's funny, but what it does is it clears all the data from our buffer, from the stream. And we've got write, and we have write line. And the difference here is that write line adds a new line character to the end. So lots of different ways that you could go about creating a file using Stream Writer. The approach that I took, I think, is one of the more flexible ways to do it, because what I am doing is I'm opening this in append mode. And I'm also opening it with a using statement. And if you open the file this way, when you are done using it, and you can see I put a little comment here, it is automatically closed. So you do not have to remember to close the file. Okay? And so that is kind of a safe way of opening the file. So here I'm opening the file, and here I am specifying a little different path. I am specifying a path that is on my C drive in a temp folder. And then this is the name of the file, my words. Okay, and I've got a Boolean called more words that I set to true. So as long as I want to enter more words, I'm going to stay in this loop. And I actually coded a Wordle game in C Sharp. And I will try to share that with you sometime during the semester. And I started it with an array of words, and then I thought, kind of cool if I could, create an external file and just read that in. And so this is what I use to create my Word file. And that's why I stored it in a more generic location. I didn't want it stored with the program that created it. So enter a 5-letter word that you want to write to the file, quick to end. So you can see I read it in, I convert the whole thing to lowercase, and then I validate it, make sure that it's not null or empty or white space, and I am checking the length. And then I'm also checking to make sure they didn't type quit. Okay, so as long as it's all good, then we go on. If there's a problem here, they have to re-enter. And then if they did type quit, I set more words to false so that we're done. Otherwise, I am writing to the file. And if the file did not exist, this will create it. If the file does exist, it will add to the file. And I'm using a right line, so each one of the words will be on a separate line. Okay, and so once we do enter a quit, then it'll kind of exit out of our loop and display, the file has been closed. So all of this is in a try block. And then I have catch blocks for various exceptions that could occur. File not found. This is highly unlikely unless there is an issue with my path. Okay, and that would have to be like invalid drive, invalid folder, because when you open for append, it's going to create the file. So the file does not already have to exist. So it would have to be something with the folder structure. But you can see I've got a couple different exceptions that are more likely to occur with file handling. And then I've got the generic catch-all. Let's see, stream reader. So what stream reader does is it lets you read from the file that you created. And so there's a couple additional methods here that can be useful. You can actually use a method called peek, and that takes a look at, what the next thing in the file is without actually reading it in. Okay, and then there is a method called seek, which actually moves the file pointer. So normally as you read through a file, you read one thing at a time, but this will let you jump forward or backward, and you can read different areas. Okay, and so a read all by itself reads the next character, kind of one character at a time. read line will read the entire line. Okay, so which of these you choose just depends on the type of processing that you're doing. So for what I was doing, I was reading in what what was in my words.txt, just so that I could basically see what was there. So I am using the using statement again, just because that is a great way to open these files. It'll automatically close it. I create a stream reader object, which I'm calling SR. And then all I really have to give it when I use new stream reader is, the path to my file. And I'm going to be reading it in one line at a time. So I declare a variable called line. And then I've got my little while loop here. And so basically, I am going to read from the file using my SR object.readLine. And I'm going to stay in this loop as long as it doesn't equal null. Well, it's going to equal null at the end of the file. Okay, so basically, I'm going to read line by line until I get to the end. So it's going to read in a line. It's going to put it into my line variable. And as long as that doesn't equal null, it will read the next line. So we read from the file into the line variable. We print that out. As long as line wasn't null, we read the next one, and so on. Once we get to the bottom of the file, it is going to hit this null condition. It's going to pop out of the loop, okay? And then the stream reader, our SR object, the file is going to automatically close. Okay, and then you can see the different exceptions that I'm checking for. Okay, and let's see. I think we have talked about all of this. Okay, so that just gives you a little taste of file handling, and you will be working with a file handling exercise in your lab assignment.